Welcome to Supernatural Circumstances, the podcast where we take you down the rabbit hole into the fantastic world of the strange, the paranormal, and the unknown. I'm Morgan Knudsen.
And I'm Mike Browne. Come along with us on this week's adventure, but only after you dim the lights and settle in. Look at what I did. I switched it around. Because,
Look at you being all creative. Well, we're talking about creativity today.
Exactly.
With our good friend Mark Boccuzzi, who is incredible, one of the founders of the Windbridge Institute.
I love Mark and I love Julie and what they do. It's amazing.
Man. Yeah. Incredible stuff. They have a plethora of research that's out there in regards to mediumship.
Morgan just said plethora in a real sentence.
I did, in a real one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such an incredible organization because both he and his wife, Dr. Julie Bichel, are, I have always said, on the leading edge of psi research. These guys are no joke. They have contributed so much to the world of this research in a highly scientific way. And Mark has a new book that we're going to be talking to him about today. Mike, do you want to talk about it a little bit?
The book is called Unlocked, and it is about how to harness your psychic abilities. And this is the book that I wish I had 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Because holy smokes, this is what everybody wants to learn. If you're interested in this stuff at all, this is like a how-to manual like Mark is presenting here, is exactly what you need.
Yeah, this is such a profound book, and I know I'm going to say this a million times to him when we talk to him here, but if you guys are out there wondering, how can I utilize this in my daily life? Is there a step-by-step guide out there as to how I can become more sensitive to the world, maybe you're looking to become a medium, I don't know. But regardless, no matter where you're sitting today, this book will benefit you. It is a step-by-step guide to not only to make your world better, but to create an environment around you that's going to allow things like after-death communication, allow things like more synchronicities to happen, allow you to really take back control of what's going on in your life through the process of surrender, mindfulness, and all sorts of things like that. It's awesome.
Yeah. So let's get into this with Mark because we've got a lot of ground to cover.
You bet. This is such a great conversation to have, and I think it's a long time coming for this conversation and also this book. It's a phenomenal book for anybody who is looking to further not only their own journey spiritually, but also their own personal adventure, I think, with psychic phenomenon. It's called Unlocked, How to Harness Your Psychic Abilities. This is such a cool book. So Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's always awesome to be here and to see you too.
We're always so excited when you've got new whatever coming out because it's always cutting edge. Whatever you're doing is always leading edge. It's always like brand new. What I loved about this particular book was, with all the advanced stuff that you do and put together, this is such a book for everybody. Like, everybody can read this. Tell us a little bit about the book and how does it fit into your broader work with Windbridge?
Sure. So thank you for the kind feedback. The book comes from the idea that everyone has access to their own psychic abilities. But a lot of times what happens is when people go out to explore and find they want to take a class, or they want to read a book, or they want to do something to activate their psychic abilities more, they'll learn a specific modality. They'll I'm going to take a class on OBEs, or I'm going to take a class on remote viewing. And they might have some good success in the beginning, but then it either tapers off, or for a lot of people, some people, they never get that feeling of success for whatever reason, because this stuff is hard, or whatever the modality they picked didn't particularly resonate with them. So the idea behind this book was like, well, wait a minute, let's start with the things that everyone has, which are these spontaneous psychic events. right? Whether it's synchronicity or intuition or some sort of dream, precog or telepathy. Let's lay the groundwork so that everyone can start having those spontaneous experiences in a controlled and ethical and productive way. And then move on to what I call intentional psi. Once you kind of get your feet under you and you know who you are and what you're doing, then you can take on things like remote viewing or out-of-body experiences. And again, I'm not saying this is an approach that everyone needs to take, but I'm always interested in the outliers, and that's sort of my work at the Wimbridge Institute. People fit into this bell curve, and a lot of times science is only interested in what's going on in the middle, and I'm interested in what's going on with the people on the edges, right? Who don't these classes work for? Who doesn't this particular method work for? What can we do to serve them? How do we get those people more involved? And the other thing too that happens is, people take these classes and they don't necessarily work or resonate with them, and then those people become skeptics or deniers.
Right.
And now we have that added to the cosmic consciousness, the interconnected consciousness, which is just more uphill battle we have to fight. So my goal is to get psi in the hands of as many people as possible.
I love that. And that's what I really love about what you've done with this.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, is that it allows people to explore this on so many different levels, at like wherever they are at. This book will meet them exactly where they are, which I really, really love. And I think it's been something that's been missing, Mark, like you say, from this field, because often a story that I might get frequently would be something along the lines of, well, I tried this thing and it didn't work, so therefore this doesn't happen or this doesn't exist. And I mean, and we see that all the time with skeptical arguments as well, is that it's just, well, if that was the case, well, then this would happen instead. And it's like, no. This is something that's far more complex than that, but not inaccessible. So what do you feel makes Unlock different from other books on psychic abilities and consciousness right now?
Well, I think the focus on spontaneous phenomena first. And to address that, I've laid out, it's always funny. I look at these self-help books and it's like 47 steps to, self-actualization. Right. I'm like, I need two steps. Right. So yeah. I wrote a book that has 10 steps, unfortunately, but they're not bad. I broke them up into categories. Right. So like the first thing is getting your head straight. Right. So getting your mind right. So things like practicing mindfulness, cultivating openness as a personality trait, considering interconnectedness, the fact that we're all interconnected, and then reinforcing your belief in the possibility of this phenomena. Because if you don't believe it's at all possible, you're probably not going to get very far.
I remember we had a guest on a little while ago, and we were talking about that very thing, the idea of belief and what it actually means for your results. I think a lot of people think, well, of course, if I see it, then I'll believe it. And it's actually not like that. It's actually the other way around. You have to have that belief. Can you talk about a little bit, before we go into the rest of the steps, why that is so important?
Well, you need to have an open mind, right? It's like, things need to be malleable. Things need to be able to move, right? And if you have a set position that this doesn't exist, you're never going to get there, right? Your consciousness is never going to be able to shift or go anywhere because you've locked it in a box, right? It's like getting a brick and then, holding it up to the wind and going, okay, wind, move the brick. And the wind probably, unless it's a hurricane, the wind probably isn't going to move the brick. But consciousness is more like a breeze. The psi phenomena is more like a breeze than it is a hurricane, I would say. So it's very subtle.
That. Yeah, I love that.
So belief is a major part, and we help with belief, or we think about belief in terms of one, think about all those spontaneous experiences that you had, like a synchronicity or a friend calling you when you were thinking about them.
So many.
Or some sort of telepathy, or you go into a room and you feel the vibe and you're getting empathetic information from wherever. And a lot of times people would just write that off as coincidence or weird or whatever. That's psi. And so that's the first step, is looking back through your life and going, these things happen to me, and that's actually evidence for psi. And then the other piece that I try to bring to the table in this book is the scientific evidence for the existence of psi. Most people don't realize that we've been studying psychic phenomena for 200 years, almost 200 years, or more, depending on what you want to call psychic phenomena. But we've been systematically studying it for decades and decades. And there's a lot of peer-reviewed scientific evidence that supports the existence of psi. And unfortunately, that evidence gets pushed away because it doesn't fit into our standard sort of materialist worldview that science likes and the world sort of has attached itself to, is this idea of materialism, and psi exists outside of materialism.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what I love too about what you're saying is that when you have the belief, it does open things up, and it's not necessarily going to be what you are thinking it's going to be. And maybe that is part of the problem that people are having, is that they think that it's going to be some gigantic phenomenon that's going to go on. And maybe it is. I mean, maybe that's how it shows up for you. But oftentimes it's these sort of subtle alignments and these subtle synchronicities that end up leading to more and more and more and more. And then they build on one another. And so it's like, okay, I wanted to create this experience, and I focused on it. And then, the experience just didn't happen for me in that moment. And it's like, yeah, but there's all of these tiny other experiences that are either lining up, or they're showing up, or they're happening. And it might not be something that's just this gigantic thing. And case in point, people that think, if I'm going to interact with a loved one after they've passed away, just to sort of use the mediumship idea, and they think that that's going to come in some glowing apparition that's going to look like, Charles Dickens story, and it doesn't. It might come from these other subtle things. And I love the fact that you're bringing up the idea that sometimes psi is something that's subtle, and it brings it back to that whole be present, be mindful, so you don't miss this stuff.
Yeah, we have one of our mediums that we work with has a saying. She says, you should be looking for fireflies you're looking for fireworks when you should be looking for fireflies, right?
Oh,
When it comes to signs and messages from the departed, or even psi in general.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So getting back to some of the other steps, one of the steps that you've got listed is interconnectedness and humility. And I think those two steps are often kind of go hand in hand. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Interconnectedness is incredibly important. But again, it goes back to this belief in getting your head straight, right? You need to understand that we're all part of a greater whole. We're all unique, we're all important, but what I choose to do impacts other people, and what other people choose to do impacts me. And so we're interconnected in our environment, we're interconnected in our social structures, and we're interconnected in our psychic structures. And so this is an important concept that people really need to try to wrap their heads around. And it's not always easy, but if you start with the things that are very obvious, like we're all breathing the same air, right?
Yeah.
And then go, well, if we can be interconnected there, maybe we can be interconnected here. And if we're interconnected here, then it sort of builds on itself.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that, how we are interconnected on that psychic level as well? Because that might be a piece that people aren't quite clear on.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Probably the best way to talk about this is an illustration. Or an example. There's a project that's been going on for a number of years now called the Global Consciousness Project, or GCP. And the idea is that they get these devices that are called random number generators or random event generators. I have one floating around here somewhere. My very, very messy desk. Anyway, they're little devices. And when the GCP first started a number of years ago, they had probably about 100 of these devices scattered around the world, all networked together, collecting data at the same time. And the way a random number generator works, it's kind of like a random coin flipper. And so it'll flip heads or tails or zeros and ones really, really quickly. And over time, what you'll see is that these will be statistically evenly distributed between zeros and ones. Now, there was a lab at Princeton a number of years ago that said, well, what happens if we get people and we put them in front of random number generators and we ask them to change their outputs? If we say, hey, can you focus your intention to change the output from more zeros or more ones? And after a number of trials and a number of experiments, they found that happened. the output of these random number generators would change based on people's focus and attention and attention. So that was sort of the groundwork for creating this network around the world. And then what they found is they were collecting data around the Global Consciousness Project that during major world events, like things like Princess Diana's funeral or other major world events, they saw deviations in the statistical output of these devices where there should be no deviation. And so what the takeaway from that is that the collective consciousness of the world, of the people on our planet, when focused on a single thing, change the planet. They change the dynamics, the psychic dynamics in which we live. And that is incredibly powerful.
Oh, it's insanely powerful. And I think it also brings it back to just as individuals, how important our focus is on various things. Like there's sort of the average memes that are kind of floating around going like, well, be careful what you feed your mind. And, you tend to kind of scroll by them like, okay, yeah, thanks. We know there's a lot of crap out there. But it really, really does begin to shape your reality. I've always been a really big supporter of the idea that when, if you're pro something, be pro something. If you're anti something, that's not going to, we live in an inclusive universe. It's going to be included in whatever you're creating. So you're going to create more of it. I think it just really brings it home on such a scientific level. You talk also about one of the steps being gratitude, which again, sort of maybe many people might feel like this is sort of an overused term and it's sort of now getting brushed under the rug, but how important is gratitude to the psi process?
Well, I think it's very important. So this goes into the next piece. The first bit was, get your head straight, and the second's get your heart straight. And so gratitude becomes an important piece along with humility and integrity, because it's so easy to get caught up in these negative emotions or negative feelings that this negative space will prevent you from getting psi information. So by practicing gratitude, by being open to new experiences, to being grateful, to being happy, you open yourself up even more to different types of psi experiences.
What you just said there, I think, is so, so, so important, that negative state will prevent you from getting psi information. That is a really, really, really big deal to the people out there that are just, maybe stuck in negative self-talk, even, I don't believe in this, whatever. So, and maybe, I don't know if you know the answer to this question or not, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is it about that negative state that jams this up so badly?
Well, usually if you're in a negative state, you're inwardly focused. And you're focused on this particular bad thing that happened to you during the day. So you're not open to receiving other messages. Right? If you're obsessed over the person that cut you off at traffic, right, you're going to miss the synchronicity that you had on the radio, or you're going to miss the intuitive hit that you had from someone at work or whatever, right?
Right.
You have to be in the present, and you have to be open to the things that are happening around you right now, not ruminating on the past or projecting on the present, which is why mindfulness is such an important piece of this as well. Everything is sort of rooted in a mindfulness practice.
Makes total sense. The next step you've got compassion, which is something often we're very much missing nowadays. But talk a little bit about compassion.
I'd like to talk about compassion, but I also want to talk about, we're talking about the heart, getting your heart right. I want to talk about integrity.
Please.
Which is one of the important steps. And what's important about integrity is that once you understand who you are and what your priorities are and the things that motivate you, one of the big things about psychic information is the ability to discern, well, what's psychic and what's my ego, or what am I making up and what's real, right? And integrity is, in my opinion, the most important thing you can develop in order to make that determination, to distinguish between real psychic information and just, noise in your head.
Right.
Sure.
Because I was talking about this with somebody the other day, and they were like, yeah, once I know who I am and what I stand for and, where my priorities are, and then I get a psychic message, it's usually something that I agree with, but I don't want to do because I know it's going to be really hard. I was like, bingo, that's exactly right. So I think the idea of integrity doesn't get talked about enough. And I really want to encourage people to do some soul searching and sit down with a notebook or take an online survey or whatever to try to help you sort out your priorities and meditate and do automatic writing or just write in a journal. Another thing about Mike, were you going to say something?
Sorry. I was going to say it's amazing how meditation and that kind of thing can uncover unconscious bias as well. Like there are things that every day I'm learning something new about, where my biases lay and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm trying to pay attention to that. And I find that you're right. You're 100% correct that being mindful, being in the moment is kind of the only way to solve this. I find myself on these crazy avenues of fear about what's going to happen in the future or regret about what's happened in the past. And those things don't serve me at all. They tend to cause me a lot of trouble. I'm not saying I don't indulge in those things still, because I'm a human being and I do.
Right.
But you're right. Being in the moment helps me to be more open to what truly is, what is happening. And this is why, everybody who I talk to about meditation. You need to do that. Do that every day, at least for 20 minutes. At least just sit still and listen to your breathing for 20 minutes. Get ready to be you 100%.
Right. I agree. Meditation, there's this thing in psi research that shows that people that have a consistent mindfulness practice tend to do much better in laboratory-based psi research, studies. So again, it's, belief and meditation or mindfulness are really like getting your head straight and getting part of that foundation, a strong foundation to being able to open up to psychic messages and psychic ability. So the other thing you wanted to talk about was compassion. So you just brought that up. So the third, so you got head, you got heart, and then you got the world, right? So how are you projecting all these things that you've learned, right, from humility and integrity and gratitude out into the world? And I have 3 areas that I like to talk about. And one of them is compassion and acts of compassion. So for me, compassion is empathy with action, right? So you can be empathetic towards people, and that's great. Got to be careful because being too empathetic can be overwhelming. But you also have now, once you've learned to be empathetic, you now have, in my opinion, the obligation to try to help other people. And that can be through anything. That could be through, writing a letter or donating time or donating some money or just taking a few minutes. If you're not in a position to do those things, just taking a few minutes out of your day to, send some good positive thoughts to people or things. I hate to use the words thoughts and prayers, but, there is a place for those things, especially, like we all have different capabilities, right? Like we were just talking earlier, like my wife's in a walker, so it's using a walker. So she can't really volunteer, but we can donate a little bit of money here and there. We can get on a phone call and talk to people, those kinds of things. So you can do whatever within your capability of doing in order to try to bring these values that you've been cultivating out into the world. And probably, sorry, go ahead, Morgan.
Oh no, I was just going to add to that. I think one thing that people need to hear in what you're saying about those acts of compassion is the fact that they're coming from a place of positive wholeness and not from anger and rage at something. I think because sometimes I think there's a line where people say, well, I'm being compassionate as they're screaming in your face about something. Yeah. And it's like, you're not being compassionate. You're not, at this point, this is not coming from that place of love, which we're going to talk about in a second. Mm-hmm. But the fact that what you're saying is that find your alignment and then be, like we were talking about earlier, be pro something. How can I lift someone else up with my cup being full, and having that full cup and then being able to be of service from that perspective, I think is a definition that is so important.
Yeah, you said it better than I did.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Next time we'll co-author a book.
Oh, there you go.
Hooray!
Yeah.
Let's see. So you mentioned love, and again, love is kind of the universal binder I like to think of it as. It's the thing that transcends space and time. It's the thing that connects us to our deceased loved ones. It's the thing that connects us to each other. So whatever you're doing in the world, are you doing it from a place of love, right? Does it come from a place of, again, compassion and love and those kinds of things? And again, like, this is sort of an ideal blueprint of everything, right? If everyone did all 10 things on this list and did them 100% successfully, then we would all be spiritually actualized and the world would be an amazing place, right? Which, you know, isn't a bad goal at the end
Not
of the day.
Not a bad goal,
right?
no.
Like
absolutely.
Worst case is you do all these things, you become self-actualized, and then who cares about psi, right? Because we're all good. We all got
You don't need it at that point, yeah.
Exactly. So, and then finally, the thing about putting stuff into the world is creativity. And people, I think creativity is really important because acts of creativity or acts of creation, because it gives your brain opportunity to do something, to break out and do something that you wouldn't normally do. This comes back to openness and that kind of stuff. And a lot of people say, oh, no, I'm not creative. I can't draw. I can't paint. I can't. And there's two kind of ways to think about that. One is, who cares? Get a notebook. You know, people give me these beautiful notebooks. They know I journal. And they give me these like beautiful notebooks that are like handmade paper. And I'm like, I can't write in this. It'll just look like chicken scratch in a piece of art. And so I just get the dumpiest little three ring binders or just scrap paper, and I'll pull out some paints and I'll just be like, and just start painting stuff. And it's okay, because what that does is it keeps your conscious mind busy and gives your subconscious mind sort of this opportunity to wander. And this is this sort of dichotomy between mindfulness, like you have to be present in the moment at all times, and mind wandering, which is an important piece of being able to get psychic information, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're just closed down to the thing that you're doing at this, like doing the dishes or whatever it may be, right? So my approach to this has been, well, you start with like a breath focused meditation, right? And you're like, okay, I'm focusing on my breath, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm going to think about that thing that I saw. Oh, remember that bird that was in the, right? And then, because I'm a human, my brain wants to think about things. So I'll follow that path for a little while, right? And I'll be like, oh, that bird was really pretty. And that bird reminds me of my friend, and my friend, right? So on and so on and so, right? So that's a useful mind wandering, right? And then if I go, oh, remember that bird? Remember that time that bird took on your head? And you're like, nope, we're not talking about this now. We're going to come back to the breathing. We're going to let that bird go and move on to the next thing, right? So that's this balance you have to strike between mind wandering and meditation and mindfulness. And creativity is a way that you can do that. But you can also bring creativity into things that you do every day, right? Like, again, like doing the dishes or working in your garden or something you're going to do at work. So there's all these opportunities to give yourself time to focus, to get into flow state. And then from there, your mind has an opportunity to pick up, your subconscious mind has the opportunity to pick up more psychic information that might be of help.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's such great steps because, again, they're so accessible for everybody. And maybe some people out there are thinking, well, wait a minute, like these are too accessible. Like, isn't there some magic thing that I'm supposed to be doing that is going to unlock this stuff? And so once people can really get into practicing some of this, because I think less people probably practice this than most, but once people actually really commit to engaging in this, what then starts to happen? You talk about psychic signposts, which I really, really like. And this idea that spontaneous side does start to come around. And it's because I think it's because we're tuning into it, not because it just shows up. I think it's something that we're tuning into that's always there.
I agree.
I want to talk about this a little bit because you cover a number of things in the book, like how it manifests in everyday life, which we've kind of talked about, but you talk about as well flashes of insight and decoding dreams. And I want to talk about that a little bit because, again, those are things that people may be, sloughing off as oh, that's crazy, or dismissing that somehow.
Yeah. The flashes of insight are very important. Now, again, I want to stress a couple of quick things. I am not a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, and you should always check with the proper professional when making important decisions.
Yeah.
that being said, you might be like, I'm going to work today and I really want to take the scenic route instead of going to going the quick way. And you find out by taking the scenic route later that there was an accident on the quick way and it wasn't that quick and you would have been held up in traffic forever and blah, blah, blah. Right. So there's things like that. Oh, I wanted to go to this party, but I decided not to go because it didn't feel right. And then turns out your ex is there and it's just a mess, right? No one wanted to deal with that. So sorry, really coming up with some stellar examples for this interview. But yeah, so these flashes of insight are really important and you need to listen to them. And that's where integrity comes in, right? Because now you have a touchstone to determine whether these flashes of insight are real psychic information, just your ego,
right?
Like going, oh, look at me, I'm special because I have psychic ability, and no, everybody has psychic ability. You're just trying to tap into it a little bit more and make yourself more open to it. And then dream interpretation, this doesn't work for everyone. Again, none of these things are going to work for everyone all the time, right? And that's the joy, that's the beauty of this to me, is that even in this 10 list of 10 things, some of these things are really going to resonate with you and some of them just aren't. And that's okay, right? You do the things that you can. And even with psychic signposts, there's going to be ones that really speak to you and ones that are just not going to be there, right? Like, I don't remember my dreams very often, but I try to keep a journal nearby just in case, like, something really interesting happens. I try to jot it down or I talk to it. Talking into my phone. Julie, on the other hand, has like an amazing connection with her dreams. She was talking about her health, again, not doctors, but she had questions about her health. So she was like going to go to bed and she was like, I want to, what do I need? What is it that I need to feel more healthy? And she had this dream about a bunch of people that were going on a road trip. And like, it was like all of her friends and everybody was there. And they didn't actually go on the road trip. They just were like packing up the car and hanging around talking, more like tailgating. Yeah. And she woke up and she's like, people, I need to be around more people. So the pandemic hit us hard and we've been isolating. And so we immediately went out. We're fortunate. We live in this little house and we have a garage, and I cleaned the garage out and I set up some places for people to sit, some tables, and now it's like a little lounge out there. And ever since then, we've been having people come in and we can 6 feet distance and do all this stuff. And it's outdoors, so there's airflow and like everyone's comfortable. And so we've been doing that and it's been great. It's been really, really helpful for her. It's really helped her mental health a lot, and mine too, to socialize with more of our neighbors and friends.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's things like that.
I agree. I think dreams are an interesting one. Like, Mike, you've had quite a lot of experience with the lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
And I've had some really interesting ones as well. And I find that when it's something I really need to pay attention to, it's very different. The dream is very different than my normal crazy, like, oh, look, the worm has a hat and it's traveling on an airplane. Like, I just, it's
and
not
there's a
like,
spatula.
And there's a spatula, and they're making pancakes. Look at that. Like, it's just, it's not, it doesn't come out like that. And I had, I'm just going to give this example really briefly because this is one that happened to me just about a month ago. I was kind of debating about working with this friend of mine who's a producer and a writer and whatever, and she's done lots of stuff for different TV shows. And I was highly considering asking her to work on a project or something like that. She's a really great writer and whatever. And it was, I had made the decision that day that I'm like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to send her an email and I'm going to ask her this. That night, this is going to sound absolutely bananas. Nobody call the silly bus on me here. I'd be like, this is going to pan out in a second. That night, I have a dream of Bob Barker. I kid you not. Bob Barker, no. Price is Right. Perfectly clear dream. And he said, I know what you're thinking. Whatever you do, do not do this. Mm-hmm. Don't invest in this. Don't. And here's why. And he went into this like long explanation, and I remember it, which I do not remember my dreams. Usually, they usually are just flashes of weird. And he went into this long explanation about investment and oil and gas and like how this affected the industry and so on and so forth. He's like, it's going to fall. Don't do it right now. And it was so profound. Like when I woke up, I was like, I write this down. I wrote it all down. And anyway, long story short, I knew that it had come from somewhere. Like, I don't think it was necessarily actually Bob Barker. But I think that was the image that came because he's been in television a long time. He's a trusted source. Somehow that's how my brain translated that energy. And lo and behold, over the last number of like weeks, that is exactly what has happened in Canada. And it actually solidified yesterday morning, which was interesting. But I was like, okay, like that would have been multiple months of wasted time down the drain had I not paid attention to whatever that message was. So anyway, it was just a quick example, but hopefully one that maybe people can kind of take away as to kind of what that looks like sometimes.
Yeah, that's a great example, and it's perfect. And that's how sometimes the messages are really, really clear. Sometimes they're not so clear. And that's the double-edged sword with psychic information, right? There's that classic story of the king that sent his messengers out to the oracle of Pythia, and he said, I want to know if I should attack the Persians. And the Pythia said, oh, if you attack the Persians, you'll destroy a great empire. And he went, okay, great, I'm going to attack. And he attacks and he loses.
Itself,
and
right.
Great empire he destroys was his own, right? And so you got to be careful. Again, I wish all this stuff was as cut and dry as that example. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And again, that's where integrity comes in.
You're right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, don't lie to yourself.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe if the king had examined his reasons for that battle, he might have come up with a different solution, but who knows?
Well, let's get into probably the subject that everybody's really, really interested in is intentional psi, because I know this is one of my favorite subjects. And you talk about this at length in the book, everything from sigils to scrying, to remote helping, to dowsing, all sorts of stuff that you cover. And I hope we get to enough of it here because this is so interesting. So maybe you can just start by explaining what intentional psi is and what that starts to look like.
Sure. So I broke the book down into two parts. Basically, the first is what I called spontaneous psi or S psi, and then intentional psi or I psi. And, I like to put things in little boxes, but there's a lot of overlap between those two things, actually, right? So the spontaneous thing, we talked about these psychic signposts that you start to get. And when you're ready and you feel grounded and you have your touchstone and you have your ideas and your focus and your mindfulness, then it might be time to take on intentional psi. So intentional psi is when you have a specific question and you're looking for a specific answer and you're following a specific protocol. Right? So sort of a gray area of that might be dreaming, right? So you go to bed and you say, okay, tonight I want an answer to this question and I want to get it through my dream and I want my dream to be really clear. And then you go to sleep. But we've talked about dreaming as sort of spontaneous, right?
Sure.
But now you've set the intention, so that sort of moves it into that intentional category. Right? Does that make sense?
Gotcha.
Dreaming's the only place I've been able to do it intentionally to this point, but it is a good starting point.
But there are also many, many, many other modalities, psi modalities that people can learn and practice and try. And if they don't work, you move on to the next one, right? Whether it's dowsing, for example, or using a pendulum, or scrying, where you do crystal gazing, which is something I like to do. Remote viewing is very popular and very powerful, and people have a lot of success with remote viewing as a way to either answer questions or find stuff or think about history, or there's lots of different applications for remote viewing, precognitive remote viewing, that kind of stuff. So yeah, the book it's funny. I showed the table of contents to a group of people. I was like, here's the book I'm writing. And they're like, dude, what are you not covering in this book? Like you've got, you touch on just about everything. I'm like, I touch on everything about this much, but cause it's an accessible book. It's not meant to be like a remote viewing manual, but it will introduce you to remote viewing. It'll introduce you to these other modalities. Remote helping is one of my favorite things. This is pretty cool. It's this idea that, and there's been laboratory studies on this, where let's say, Morgan, you're going to have to do your taxes and you hate doing your taxes.
I really do.
And I feel bad. So I'm going to sit here and go, Morgan is going to have an okay time doing your taxes and it's going to go easily and she's going to be focused and it's going to go well. And lo and behold, it does, right? Not because I did your taxes for you, but I gave you some emotional support to do your taxes, right? And you're like, wow, that worked out better than I thought it was going to, or whatever, right? Not that I saved you a bunch of whatever. The process was easier because there was something out there rooting for you, even at a distance, right?
Yeah, I love that. I think realizing that we can help like that again comes back to what you talked about with the Global Consciousness Project, that influence is real, that's there.
Sort of another real world example is, I'm Julie's full-time caregiver, so it's difficult for me to leave the house. So we get our groceries delivered. And a lot of times I'll place the order and the person's face will pop up on my phone, be like, Sean is about to do your grocery shopping. I'm like, great. Sean, do a really good job.
Go, Sean, go.
Find all the things. Go, Sean, go, right?
Yeah.
And so whenever I do that, Sean rules, or whoever the person is, like, everything is in stock. Nothing is bad. Everything shows up. The order shows up on time, blah, blah, right? And I swear to Bob, every time I don't do that, something goes wrong with the order. Right, it gets delivered to the wrong address. They don't give us the right stuff. Everything's out of stock. Right, whatever the thing is. So again, I don't know if that's just my precog going, this is going to be a good order, so you should help Bob or Sean. But that's my sort of real world remote helping plan whenever we do the groceries is help the shopper.
It's a good way to use it and a great example of how this stuff can be utilized in an everyday world. I think sometimes people think, well, it's got to be about this great big thing that I want, that I've got to have some sort of huge goal in, and then I'm going to enact this methodology on this huge goal. And maybe you do have a huge goal. Maybe that is your thing. But this is literally something that, with the mindfulness that you were talking about and the different steps and having this mindset, that you can use literally for everything. I think you can't overtax the system. It's one of those things that you can utilize no matter what you're doing. It doesn't have to be necessarily like, I'm going to go out and be a paranormal investigator and have this happen. No, you can use this and order your groceries.
Right.
I think that's really, really important. So speaking of spirits and things like that, delving into that a little bit, because I've definitely got some experience on that end of things and asking for help and assistance and so on and so forth. You talk about after death communication and stuff like that within this chapter as well. I've found over the years, and I think we talked about this on one of the last times that you were back on the show. I've found that these practices and using those to engage in the spirits that I know I've got around me, that I know I can contact on a regular basis, has also made a massive difference in my psyche. But without the stuff that you're talking about, I don't know whether that connection would be near as clear as what it is. So can we talk a little bit about how this affects stuff like after death communication?
Sure. So, it's all about love at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
So if you create, it's one of those things where, we kind of joke like, why would anyone on the other side want to talk to us over here? It's awful. Right?
No.
Sorry, I'm not really that much of a
terrible.
fan.
We're all terrible.
I
Yeah.
am.
It's funny and acceptable.
I'm a nihilist. Anyway, so how do you create an environment that is conducive to inviting your deceased loved one, your DLO, to join us and to join you and talk to you? And again, if you move through these steps of gratitude and love and belief and humility, then you're basically generating a field or an environment that is conducive to after-death communication, I believe. And again, those communications can come through dreams. That's how I usually have my after-death communication experiences. They can come through synchronicity, which is another big, psychic signpost. They could come through signs and symbols, songs, things on the, songs on the radio, things that you might see in the world, numbers, whatever. So again, it's all about creating space for psychic phenomena to take place in your daily life.
Well, you just hit on something I have to talk about, because I think what you just said is so key, and I think this is where people get screwed up with this. Is the fact that they think they're maybe bringing something in to happen, where I think you just nailed it, where you're actually creating the space in order for this stuff to appear. You're creating this environment. And that's why it comes back to your steps. That's why it comes back to being all about the person. It's not all about, okay, well, I've got to go find this person or that person, or I've got to, go out there and do this thing. No. This is about you creating the arena in which this stuff can manifest. And I think that is such a really big deal. And maybe it's a hair splitting difference, but I think if people can hear that, they'll stop so much of the efforting and start coming back in and going like, okay, wait a minute. What am I doing to harness the environment around me from the inside out to allow this stuff to begin to manifest? Am I hitting the mark with that?
Yeah, you are absolutely hitting it right on the head. 100% correct. Yeah,
because I think that's where a lot of things get screwed up with people that, at least that I've spoken to, that are, have tried this, and they're like, well, I worked myself to the bone trying to figure this out or that out, or, this isn't working or that's not working. And it's not going to be out there. It's going to be, it's coming from you. And if it's coming from you, then you have to work on you. And then what you perceive in what's around you is is going to be reflective of that. It's one of the best examples that I heard was from Daryl Anka. And he had said in one of his talks, he said, it's like looking in the mirror and you're frowning, you're miserable, and then fighting with the mirror, trying to convince it to smile. And it's like, you can't commit, you have to do it. And then the mirror is going to show it back to you. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, Mark, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people look for stuff externally and, they try to find a guru, they try to find a guide. And again, there's not anything wrong with that. If you're one of those people that needs to, interact with other people on a regular basis and, look for advice or then, and if that works for you, that's great. But for some people, it doesn't. And, I guess to some degree, this is the introvert's guide to psychic ability, right? Being an introvert myself, it's probably got some tone of that in there. But yeah, it's all about you at the end of the day, right? And I want to say that, but I don't want people to get discouraged either. Like, I did all the steps and it's not working for me, and and that's, that's okay too, right? Because the universe doesn't give you any more than you can handle.
Yeah.
And, maybe, like right now, I've said this several times now, but, I'm my wife's primary caregiver and I'm doing a lot of this stuff and I'm getting the information that I need, but I haven't had any grand spiritual transformative experience,
sure.
Right? Because guess what? I'm not in a position to go through an existential crisis at the moment.
That's true. Yeah.
Right? I got enough going on where, I can handle these little bits and help my grocery guy and, all that kind of stuff. But I'm not here to suddenly have a grand epiphany. I would melt, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what you're saying too with all of this that's really important is that it doesn't have to be the grand epiphany either. It really doesn't have to be that. It can be the small things. And I mean, there's a lot of people, that's where I think this book is so helpful for people right now, is that there's a lot of people that are in that boat. I mean, in different ways, but they're trying to keep their head above water. They're trying to just get through the next day, whether it be financial situation or whether it be, sick loved one or whether it be, just day-to-day stuff. I think that's where this is so empowering and important, because when you start to realize that you do have control, and that to me, what this book is really about is about empowerment. And when you realize that you have that control over these day-to-day things, you might not be able to reshape your environment overnight, but when you realize that you've got, and you start seeing this progress, when you start practicing this stuff and you start seeing it happen, because it will. I mean, that's the natural progression of following this stuff, is that it will start to happen. Once you start seeing it happen, whatever that looks like for you, you start to change how you view the day to day, and you start to get more empowered. You start to understand that you are, a psychic person that can tap into this stuff. It really does change so much, which is, as I say, why I really, really love this book. It's so cool, Mark. You've done a great job.
Oh, thank you so much. I would only say, you're talking about control, and that's correct, right? You have agency, right? But ultimately, it's also about surrender.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's about giving yourself permission to do all these things and alignment, right?
Yes.
Because once you start to think of it in terms of control, it's going to slip right through your hands, right?
Right.
It's and again, I don't mean I'm not discounting what you're saying because you're 100% correct. But
No, I get it. I totally get it. It's a great thing to bring up. Yeah, and I think too with just to add to that is that when you surrender, like you were saying, and you can see this stuff happening, then the act of surrender is admitting that everything is in control on some level. It is in control. You don't need to be doing the mental crazy stuff that we do to think that we're making the machine work. The machine works. The machine works on its own. Yeah. Yeah. Did I get that?
Yeah.
I think you got it. That's good.
Okay. Well, this has been fantastic. Guys out there that need this book, you need this book. It is absolutely phenomenal. It's one of those, as I say, it's one of those books that is, you will read it 10 times and go back to it 10 times because you're going to find more and more and more that's just that you're going to get out of it. It's called Unlocked: How to Harness Your Psychic Abilities. Mark, where can they find it and where can they find you?
They can find the book on Amazon. It's available in print in an audiobook and on Kindle. And you can find me at the Windbridge Institute. So if you want to email me, you can send me a note at mark@windbridgeinstitute.com.
And all of that is going to be in the show notes, so you guys can go and pick this up, as I say, and give it to people. Get an extra copy and give it to people that need some boost right now, that need some guidance, that need some boost. Because if they're ready for it and they're ready to hear it, hands down, it's going to change how you go about your day to day. So thank you so much, Mark. This has been amazing.
Thank you for having me. I always love hanging out with you too. It's always a blast. So thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
That was great.
And we are back, and another lovely conversation with the adorable Mark Boccuzzi, who is just such a lovely man, so accessible and easy to talk to. And he wants to talk to you. I mean, you heard it. If you have questions for him, he's easy to get a hold of.
He is, and he's everything that you probably think he is after listening to his conversation. He is just the most warm and lovely individual, as you were saying, Mike. And I really can't say enough about what he's created with this book, because he's such a high-end thinker, and he's incredibly, incredibly smart. He's managed to take all of that knowledge, or at least a piece of that knowledge, because it's very vast, and turn it into something that is so accessible for people,
right,
which is really important. So, I mean, if you're way along in your journey of spirituality and intuition, this book is for you. If you're just starting out, this book is for you. Or if you are completely in left field and confused, this book is also for you.
100%.
It's so well done.
I can't think of a more accessible, easier to read book about this specific topic. It's not full of a bunch of nonsense and numbers and, things that there's not a lot of graphs in there that you have to sort of sort through. This is for you, dear listeners, to read and try to understand ways where you can realize the spontaneous sigh that is happening around you and lead yourself toward intentional sigh, which is, I just love it. I love it so much.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head there too, which is some of this is about understanding maybe what you're already experiencing, and you want to learn how to do it intentionally. How do I harness what I know I'm capable of doing and put it into practical practices, that like what he talks about. I think that's been something that's just been horribly missing from from all of this. It really has.
Right.
And I mean, this is really why this show exists, is to present stuff like that.
Yes, and speaking of this show, we have an announcement.
We have some changes.
It's with heavy heart that I am doing this, but I have some personal stuff going on right now that doesn't allow for me to continue with, I'm feeling a little emotional, that doesn't allow me to continue with supernatural circumstances. That said, supernatural circumstances is absolutely 100% going to continue.
Absolutely.
And Morgan will continue bringing you amazing guests with super interesting conversations. She promises to do that. She's promised me to do that. I wouldn't be able to leave in good conscience otherwise. But I have faith that Morgan is going to be able to kill it.
Well, I appreciate that vote of confidence, and I hope everybody sticks with it, because we've got so much more that is coming up, and probably some interchanging co-hosts as well. That are going to be.
You have some ideas. Good.
I have a few ideas. Like
good,
nobody,
good,
of
good.
course, it's nobody permanent, of course, but there's definitely going to be some new, interesting voices on the show that hopefully
Right.
everybody is going to be all raring to go with, and
So
and
there's
Mike,
no
we're
big
gonna-
there's no big mystery. There's nothing to be solved.
No,
Don't worry,
anybody
Morgan and I
who's
are
trying to stir
fine.
Stuff up. Yeah, exactly. Right. I
Yeah.
was like, here comes the rumors. Here we go.
No.
They got in a big fight.
Yeah. If you want to make rumors, you're just going to waste your own time and energy. Just don't. It's me and my stuff. I've got some, everybody knows I had some heavy stuff happen with my dad. There's that. And then there's some other stuff that's going on that I really need to focus on.
Yeah.
And if I don't focus on those things, I may be living in my car. So
Yeah.
let's not do that. I don't think that there's room enough for me and my cats in my car.
Well,
Yeah.
we're not gonna let that happen. And
No.
we've as I say, the show is absolutely going to continue in your
100%.
legacy and good stead. And the next number of months, we're going to see some more fantastic guests. We're going to have some interesting and probably very fun-loving co-hosts that will join us. And we hope that you continue to join us as well. And
Well, that's what I was
join
just
the
going to
adventure.
suggest. Maybe I will be back as a co-host again at some point.
Well, I would hope so.
Yeah. Maybe. Or maybe even a guest one day.
Maybe even a guest.
Oh,
Yes,
that would be
even
weird.
a little bit. Yeah.
But anyway.
A little bit, but either way, it's going to be positive, and so we don't want anybody to
No.
get down or give up. We definitely are not, and it's going to be, I think, progressive motion forward. And Mike, of course, you are welcome back anytime you want to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Well, of course.
So thank you for joining us on this eerie expedition, dear listeners. I'm about to cry, so I don't want to do that.
And remember, there is no line between the natural and the supernatural. All is consciousness. Until next time, stay curious, friends, and stay with us.
Yeah, and stay with us and not curious about what's going on. It's me. It's 100% me.
It's all him. It's all him.
Yeah.
See you, everyone.
Supernatural Circumstances is a co-production of Entity Seeker Paranormal Research and Teachings and Good Egg Studios. This podcast is part of the Curious Cast podcast network. Theme music by Corey Johnson of Catalyst Records in Edmonton, Alberta. You can learn more about Morgan Knudsen at entityseeker.ca and learn more about me, Mike Browne, and listen to my show, Dark Poutine, at darkpoutine.com. Feel free to email the show at supernaturalcircumstances@gmail.com.